Alright, hello everyone. So this research article is about the socioeconomic gaps in science achievement. And it's by these authors right here, Laura, Elizabeth, and Christian. I have no idea how to say their last names without really messing them up. So what they did is they took a sample of 9,250 students, and these students went to about 2,700 different schools, and they followed them from kindergarten to 8th grade. And so the kids were basically like in clusters, and so there were clusters about 10 to 11 kids per school. And what they did is they examined their science achievement and tried to figure out, does socioeconomic status play a direct role in students' science achievement. While they were there, they decided to also look at the children's characteristics, such as their race or their gender, and some parental and household characteristics. Like they looked at the parents' education level and how much money each house had, and did the parents do things with the children inside the home that were science-based, or did they also put kids in after-school programs, or did out-of-home activities that were aligned with science. They also looked at school characteristics like professional development for the teachers or the teachers' education level. They looked at the students' reading and math achievement also to determine, does all these things have a direct impact on students' science achievement if the children live in poverty situations. Okay, so very interesting findings. The first thing that they found is that family income has a significant impact on students' science achievement. Now, it also plays a role in other aspects, and we'll get into that further later, but it has a direct impact on students' abilities in science. Okay, so then they also found that there was an achievement gap, but not extreme, in between children from low poverty situations versus middle class situations. So there was a gap, but it wasn't substantially big, which is also very interesting. And so they also said that there were gaps between children whose parents did not graduate high school and children's parents who had some sort of degree, and that these children lived in poverty situations. So education of the parent, even though they lived in poverty, also played a role in the student science achievements. So they also found that your parents' income has some type of influence on student achievement in science. And so some things that they said could play a role in this were the fact that a parent would have or would not have money to be able to put the child in outside science activities like science museums, or the parent, because the parent was working, would not have opportunities to actually engage in science activities with their child at home. And so they said these are some things that parents who live in poverty may struggle with, that would also play a role in that child either doing better or not so better in science, and as it pertains to them living in a poverty-stricken situation. They also said that parental education was associated with large increases in student achievement. So not student science achievement. Let me say it that way. So even though a child lived in poverty, had their parent had more than a high school diploma, and if they went even further than a bachelor's degree, that child, although they lived in poverty, still did better than those children that had lived in poverty but their parents didn't have as much education. And so there was an association between uh, the parents' education level and the child improving their science achievement over time. And so even though you live in poverty, if your mom is educated, or your dad, either or whoever you live with, has some type of education, it gave you a better chance for having a higher science achievement. Some other things, they also found that children of African American or Hispanic backgrounds tended to score lower than white students. Children with no English at home, they perform low in all grade levels in science. They also found that in third grade and fifth grade, older students outscored their younger students. Boys tended to score higher than girls, and that children living in small urban communities outscored children that lived in rural settings. This was kind of interesting to me, that public school kids actually scored higher in science than students attending Catholic or religious schools. That was kind of interesting to me, because people pay all this money for their kids to go to private school. It's not the place for science, I guess. At the same time, there were more frequent opportunities for science learning in homes that were associated with higher science achievement. There were learning opportunities outside of the home environment were related to higher levels of science achievement skills across all these grade levels. And so what was interesting is that if kids had more opportunities to do science in the home, or they had learning opportunities outside of the home that were related to science, these kids actually did better. So science kind of reminds me of when I think about math. The more you math, the more you're better at math. And so I guess that the more you science, the more better you are at science. At the same time, they said that there was a positive association between the amount of science instruction and science achievement, which also makes sense, because the more learning that you're doing and the more opportunities you have, the better you get at something. Kind of like if you were playing a sport, the more you do it and you do it accurately, the better you get at it. So science is kind of like that, kind of like math, in that aspect that the more you science, the better you get at science. So let's see what else. So higher levels of parent education predicted increases in science achievement. So it also influenced the fact that if kids did better in mathematics and reading, and those kids who did better in mathematics and reading were more likely to do better in science, which is kind of interesting as well. Let's see what else. So they did say, made sure to say that their income was associated with early science achievement. And so some things that were very interesting to me were the fact that even if a kid lived in poverty, if a kid had more opportunities and more instruction for science, that they could do better. And so what's interesting is a lot of times teachers believe that they are powerless in a classroom because of outside factors, and some of the things that I read in here kind of really drive that understanding that we do have power in our classrooms, and that the more we give kids, the better opportunities they are that are there for them to achieve at higher levels, even though they live in poverty, which is kind of interesting to me. And I think that's about it. Yep, that's about it. There were some things that authors did say that suggested that, and I mentioned those earlier, about people who live in poverty have limited incomes, and so they have, because they're having to work, they might have limited time to be able to give their kids these opportunities, which kind of drove my thoughts about a conversation we had the other day about providing people or children opportunities within the classroom, so all children would have the same opportunities to grow in science. And so this kind of really drove that home for me, especially because it said that even though a child lived in a poverty situation, that had they had more opportunities for science, that they would do better. Alright, so anyways, I know this is like 11 minutes and 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Oh god, I went over my 5 minutes. So sorry. Have a great day.